Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And we're back again with another amazing guest. He's a fellow podcaster. Um, but before we get started, I just want to let you guys know I appreciate all the support and love that you guys give, and I appreciate you guys leaving comments and um, allowing us to keep bringing these amazing stories to you. Today, we have another amazing guest, Brooke. She is a fellow podcaster. She is a grief educator. If you guys haven't, I'm gonna put her links down below. Go check out her channel, man. She is bringing some amazing stuff to the table, man. And as always, we're going to have a great time. We're going to have a beautiful conversation. And this her story is going to move you guys in so many ways. So without further ado, let me just bring up my guests and let's get this thing rocking, man. Thank you guys for everything. Brooke, how's it going?
Hey, Jenny, it's going well. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for being on today. Thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to this since we talked the last time, and I've been checking out your channel. I just watched the one that you did with your ex-husband.
Yeah.
And to see you guys talk and just do your thing, I was in tears, man, because that was emotional. Your channel is so amazing, man. And
thank you.
The work that you're doing, thank you for doing it.
Of course, also, thank you for what you do.
Yeah, man. We're here, man. And I want to take a minute and let you introduce yourself, tell people where you're from, and then we're going to jump into your story, your journey, and we're going to have a great conversation. So thank you. So I'm going to hand it to you. Tell people where you're from and tell people who you are and where you're from.
So I am Brooke Carlock. I am a grief educator, and I am from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, so Amish country. I'm not Amish, but I'm surrounded by Amish people.
Yes. Now let's your journey started with some major losses. I was just thinking about it. You have experienced loss after loss after loss, and so yeah. Let's go back. It wasn't always like that, right? Being a child and growing up and things like that. You was a normal child, just like most of us, right?
Relatively. Yeah, I usually don't go back that far because of all the things that happen, a little bit later, but I'll go back for you, Tony. So, I mean, I definitely had, I would say, more struggles in my childhood than a lot of people that I knew. My parents went through a horrible divorce where it was just, everything was mean and like the court involved, and it lasted about 6 years from the time that they separated until they got divorced. And at the time, it was like the early 80s. There weren't a lot of people who were going through that. So I was a little different in that way, feeling like, like my life wasn't that great. And I had to kind of be the go-between between my parents. I was the middle child out of 5, and I was the people pleaser of the group. That was kind of how I learned to be a people pleaser, because I just, my parents were always saying bad stuff about each other. So I was the one who was trying to keep the peace and had to listen to both sides of the story. And it was an interesting situation. But yeah, that kind of put that caregiving, people-pleasing thing into me right from that early age.
Right. And that's for a child to try to navigate, being especially when you're in the middle of your parents and watching what they're going through.
Yeah. I mean, it was to the point where my mom, she would not be anywhere near my dad. So like, she wouldn't talk to him. She wouldn't communicate with him in any way. She wouldn't be in a room where he was. So she missed like all of our big life events, birthday parties, graduations, weddings. Like, she missed that stuff because she wouldn't go because my dad was there. So it was terrible at the time. But then when I got divorced from my first husband, I kind of used that. I learned I learned kind of what not to do from watching my
Right.
parents. So it turned out to be a good thing, because I figured out what I didn't want to do and ended up having a really great, friendship, which you saw in the video. Like, we have a great co-parenting relationship and, have maintained a friendship despite all the stuff that we've been through, and we're not together anymore. But we always kept it cordial, and hey, it didn't work out, but we still have these kids together and we're going to get along. And so I'm appreciative for kind of what I went through, that it led to that. But on the grief side, the first person I lost was my grandfather. I just remember his funeral was on my 10th birthday. And when you're 10, that kind of stands out, that you have a funeral on, what you
Right.
think is a big birthday. And he had lived next door to me, and we were super close. He had a horse farm, and we used to go, ride the horses at his farm. And he was just a very, he was an awesome guy. So that was tough. But then nothing else really until I was in my 20s, and my sister passed away completely unexpectedly. She was sick. I talked to her on the phone. It was right before Christmas Eve. And I talked to her. She sounded like she had a bad cold, but she said she had gone to the doctor. And then the middle of the night, that night after I had talked to her, I get a phone call from my brother-in-law that he can't wake my sister up. And she ended up dying in her sleep. She had pneumonia and her lungs filled up with fluid, and the doctors didn't catch it and, didn't do like a chest scan. They just gave her medicine, and she died in her sleep. And she had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. She was only 32. So that was really like the first, you expect your grandparents to die, but you don't expect your 32-year-old sister, to die out of nowhere when it's told she's not even, it's not a long-term illness. We thought it was just a cold.
Right.
So that was really that kind of entry into the life isn't fair. Like, you never know how long you have. Grief can happen whenever. And then it kind of continued after that. So that was unexpected. That doesn't happen to a lot of people. But then my sister-in-law, my brother Colin's wife, had a kind of random, she had a surgery. They nicked something in the surgery, and that just led to a spiral. I could take forever talking about it, but a spiral to the point where she ended up needing a transplant, and then got a transplant related cancer. And then she passed away from that cancer, and she was in her early 30s. So that was kind of another early loss. My cousin died from cancer in her 30s. So I had this group like, when I made it to like 35, I was like, okay, I'm doing better than most of the women in my family here. So that's good. Yeah. And then the rough years, then we had the big ones. So it's funny, the ones that I already talked about, those are the ones that I don't usually talk about really to anyone, because everybody just asks about the ones that are so close together. But so,
There's a relationship though, like and as grief practitioners, what I'm saying, these are things that we carry with us that help mold us, right?
Yeah.
Like just like you said, there's a lot that I don't talk about neither, like just like yourself, my grandparents and things like that, because for some odd reason, I was just talking about this with someone. For some odd reason, we look at it as if this is the natural way, right? You know what I'm saying? We're supposed to outlive our parents. We're supposed to outlive our grandparents and things like that. And in a lot of ways, with our grieving cycle, we can come to a place of acceptance with that. Right. You know what I'm saying? But losing your sisters and things like that, especially if they're your older sisters or middle sisters, younger sisters, it's a relationship that we have with them. These are the ones who are with us majority of the times when we're not, when our parents not, we're with our siblings, right?
Exactly.
So of course that's his own set of relationship values right there. So of course we're going to process it a little bit different, right? Because when our siblings are gone, we go, man, now what am I supposed to do? Depending on the relationship that you have. I've talked to people who have crappy relationships with their siblings, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? It's better him than me, or better her than so it's all relationship wise. But then it comes that one.
Yep.
It comes that one that's really unexpected.
It really does.
And and it's the one that gets us.
Yep.
Child loss.
Yes.
That's the one that gets us, because
Definitely.
we don't expect to outlive our children. We want our
No.
children to outlive us, right? And it's the reality that comes with it, that there's nothing written that says that we're exempt from it.
Mm-hmm.
As parents, we get knocked around, And after, like I said, I watched your podcast with your ex-husband. I watched the one where grief messes with your body, and I think it all coincides, right? Like I said, I'm a fan. I watch. I watch. So, and I say that because I want people to go and go and support your channel. I want them to go and look at the work that you're doing. Phenomenal.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it.
All right, we'll get back in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of how this all started was my dad. I got a phone call in the middle of the night from my stepmom that my dad had passed away in his car from a heart attack on the side of the road. And that was a shock because he was larger than life. Like, we didn't know anything was wrong. It was completely unexpected. So that one was really, really rough. And I was very close with my dad. So that was tough. And then the day of my dad's funeral, I got a phone call that my stepmother had overdosed on pills and alcohol on the day of his funeral. So, and she had issues. That would be a whole other podcast, but she was an alcoholic and wasn't doing well, and just decided, and my dad was keeping her alive, basically. For the last couple of years of his life, a lot of his life was about taking care of her. And she, I guess, just decided she couldn't go on without my dad, or didn't want to face the people at the funeral. And yeah, so she committed suicide on the day of my dad's funeral. And then I spent my dad's funeral explaining to everyone why she wasn't there. And I was so angry at her because I didn't get to grieve. I wanted that time. I had to do the eulogy, and instead I'm thinking about, okay, I don't know who this person is, and now I need to tell this person, and it just was not what I wanted to be focused on. And then, she had a brother, but I helped him. He asked me for help with planning everything. So I went right from planning all my dad's stuff at his funeral to planning my stepmom's. And, we did that. That was over with. And then my mom, a month later, my mom got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So that was rough. And then, like you said, the worst of them all, it was 3 months to the day after my dad died. February 9th, I got the phone call that no parent ever wants to get, that my oldest son, Max, who was 18 at the time, he and my daughter Libby were in a car accident. They were driving from Libby's dance class to my ex-husband's house because it was his visitation night on Wednesday. And my son went through a stop sign and they were hit by a car carrier truck. And my daughter died instantly at the scene. She was 10 years old. My son, Max, was injured when people got there. He was in the car and he was unconscious, and they got him out of the car. And then the ambulance got there and they were able to revive him. But he had injuries to his head and they weren't sure how extensive they were. So by the time I got to the accident scene, the ambulance was already taking him to the hospital. So I didn't get to see him. And yeah, I had already known that Libby would probably be dead. My my ex-husband had called me just screaming into the phone that the kids were in an accident and I don't think they made it. And, you get that phone call and it's just the thing I remember the most, Tony, is feeling so cold. It was like all the blood drained out of my body.
Yeah.
That's the one feeling that I remember. Like I just got numb and freezing cold. And I just remember the whole time on the way there just saying no, like no, 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 just over and over, just in complete shock. And then when I got to the accident site, they had draped sheets over the car so I couldn't see anything, and they would not let David, Libby's dad, and I like get near the car. They said you can't go over there. They actually like held him back because he was trying to get to Libby in the car, and they're like, you don't want to see the car, you don't want to see that. So they held us back, and then they said basically the best thing we could do would be to go to the hospital because there's nothing we could do, for Libby at that point. So they said, go to the hospital and take care of your son. And so that's what we did. We went there. He had a bunch of tests done. And it was the weirdest thing because I learned that day how amazing the brain is because he was on a 30-second delay in his brain. So everything was okay with him, except he could only remember things for 30 seconds at a time. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a movie called 50 First Dates, and a character in that movie forgets everything right away. Tom,
yes.
his name is. My son was that like whatever 10-second Tom. That was my son. So he would like look around. Where am I? Why am I in the hospital? And we would explain, you were in a car accident. It's okay, whatever. And then right about the time that he would realize and ask if Libby was okay and what happened, he would forget everything and it would start over again. And it was the most bizarre thing to witness, but to the point, I mean, he was like that for hours, and they said eventually it would go away, and it was like the brain's way of protecting itself.
Right.
And it got to the point where, I mean, after a few hours, like it's the middle of the night in the hospital, and we got to the point where we were just kind of laughing because it was such a horrible situation. Like you could not be in a more horrible situation. But then just to have him saying like, where am I? What's going on? And we'd be like, you'll forget about it in 30 seconds anyway. Like, don't worry. Like we'd tell you, but you're just going to forget, and we were like, at one point we just kind of looked around like, what is happening? What kind of bizarro world did we just like step into here? Right. But then he snapped out of it and he was okay. He just had a really bad concussion, and that was that. And then it sunk in that Libby was gone. And like you said, it is the worst. I mean, having just lost my dad and my stepmom and losing my sisters and all that, you can't, every grief is awful. And I say that to people, like, just because I lost a child doesn't mean that I don't think that your grief is important. Like everyone's grief is their own grief, and they experience it different ways. Like your grief is terrible to you. Losing Libby was literally the worst thing I could possibly imagine. It was so devastating. So that was losing Libby. And then my mom died after that. So she died of the pancreatic cancer. And it was just like, okay, what else could possibly? But I don't want to ask that question because then something. I don't want to face it.
Right? Yeah. Because I can relate to what you just said, and you're absolutely right. Those words, those words are nothing that a parent wants to hear. And when you lose a child, there's a sense of reality after, and it all depends on the individual, how long after you come to a place where you understand that we're not exempt from it, right? But it doesn't change the pain. It does not change the pain whatsoever. And that is so, and I tell everybody this, that is something I wish on no one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a good relationship with your parents, again, these things that we don't wish on anyone, right? And you didn't even have chance to even process the losses leading up to it. And now you have your son, right?
Yep.
I can I have to ask, once the reality set in with him, how did he process it? Because you as a parent, you have to process that loss, but you also
Yeah.
have a son, your other kids that you're trying to, help and things like that. You have an ex-husband that's there. And so you have all of these different variables that not only that you have to contend with, but helping everybody else contend with it as well. How was he after that?
He was, people always ask, and I say the best thing that ever happened was the police officers, like the trauma team at the accident, they contacted us immediately when he got home from the hospital and gave us information for a specific trauma therapist
Right.
that, deals with really bad trauma. And he started going to her right away. And I think that was a huge help. I think that everyone around him did everything that we could to assure him that we didn't blame him in any way. It was an accident. When I say Max is a giant teddy bear, he always has been the sweetest, kindest heart you could possibly imagine. He drove like a grandma. We made fun of him all the time. Like, he was so careful. He took great care of his car because he was always worried about it. And what had happened was his check engine light came on, and he had actually called my ex-husband and said, "What do I do? My check engine light came on." And so David was on the phone with him when they got in the accident. He was
Oh,
just so David had told him, "Okay, if you're afraid to drive it, then there was a farmer's market coming up." He said, "Pull over into the farmer's market parking lot. I'll come and get you guys and I'll look at your car and make sure it's okay." So he must have just been so worried. Like, knowing his personality, he must have just been so nervous about the check engine light and what was wrong with his car. And the farmer's market was right across the street that they got hit on, and he just, accidentally went through that stop sign, and the truck just happened to be there. Wrong place, wrong time. And we, because we know him so well and know his personality, it was very, very easy to let go of that blame. Like, we never had that blame. It was very much, this could literally happen to anyone. Like, we said over and over and over, this is not your fault. I mean, the court will say it is. He did end up getting charged for going through the stop sign. The hardest thing is he doesn't remember any of it. He cannot remember anything about the accident, which I think is a blessing. I'm glad that he doesn't remember any of it, but he remembers picking Libby up from dance and heading that way, but he does not remember anything about the accident or he doesn't remember being in the hospital. He just remembers waking up at home with us taking care of him, which is when the 30-second stuff went away. And I guess, everything around then just kind of disappeared. And I hope it doesn't come back. It hasn't yet. But yeah, because of us constantly telling him that we didn't blame him, which we don't, it just sucks. It's just something that sucks. It could have happened to anybody.
right.
It's terrible that it happened to us. It's terrible that it happened to him. But he is doing okay. I think he took that in, and I think he knows he made a mistake, but anybody could have done the same thing. He feels bad. He says all the time, I wish I could trade places with her. Like he'd do anything to bring Libby back and take her place, And so he's definitely going through the loss of a sister, but for all intents and purposes, for how he could be doing and how a lot of people would be doing in his situation, I think he's doing remarkably well, honestly. I mean, because of the concussion, he took a few months off. He was in college. He took a few months off of school, but then went back to school, doubled up on his classes, and graduated, and got a good job, and he's a solid kid. He's a great kid. My other son, Grayson, actually is good. He was 16 at the time, and he is actually having a rougher time because he was supposed to be in the car and he took an extra shift at work. So he would have been in the seat that Libby was sitting in if he wouldn't have taken that extra shift at work. So he deals with a lot of it should have been me, the survivor's guilt, which we know about that happened. So he has a lot of that survivor's guilt. She was so good. She was like the good kid. Why was it her? But overall,
you're there trying to help them process this, like, because I can only imagine, like, I'm going with you on this journey, and I'm going, as a mother, you're in between it, and as the father, like, how is he processing this? Is he in your corner as well? And helping you, with the children, helping them while he's trying to process it as well, right? And so this has to be a really, really major supportive group situation right now, because there's no way to point the blame at anyone. And a lot of times we want to, right? But a lot of times we want, but just like you said, it could have happened to anyone, right? So now we know that you can't do that. And plus, you don't want, especially a child, you don't want a child to carry that burden of blame, because it'll destroy him.
Yeah.
It'll destroy him. But yet you got two children, you got your father, you just lost your mother, right? And so now you have a combination of all of these. How are you holding up this moment, right?
Yeah. I'm surprisingly okay. I mean, I am just sort of doing my thing. People ask me that all the time, like, how are you still standing? And a lot of it, I think, is because I'm such a nerd. I've been a teacher for 22 years, and that is my go-to. So that is almost my way to cope. And that's kind of how I got into this whole thing. Was I've also been a freelance writer for my whole life, pretty much. So writing was my thing. So I just started processing through writing, and then people kept asking how I was doing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to make a blog, and I'm going to write about how I'm feeling. And that way I can tell people, read the blog instead of having to say it over and over and over again.
Right. No, I understand.
So then I wrote the blog, and then just people were responding from all over the world. Like, thank you for saying this out loud. Thank you for being so honest. Thank you for talking about how much it sucks and and making us feel seen. And then that just sort of led into the YouTube channel. And that's what kept me going. It helped the learning, because then I started taking classes. Then I became a grief educator, went through the certification course, and I studied with Lucy Hone on resilience. And I just was like, I'm going to learn all that I can about this, because that the more you know, the more you feel normal. And the more it helps you process. And through helping other people process, it helped me. I mean, it really saved me, helping other people. Plus, it made me feel like, finding a purpose. It doesn't have to be a grand purpose, but my purpose was, all of these things that have happened to me, I have to make it worth something. It's never going to be worth the people that I lost. But like, all of these things that happened had to happen, for they
I
haven't happened to a lot of people. So I need to use that for
yeah,
something, because why go through all of these experiences if I'm just gonna cry in my bed all day? I have to do something with all of this. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of what brought me here. And trust me, Tony, I still have my days. I
Okay,
still
you know
have my
what?
sit on the sofa days. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just telling somebody that because I got in a conversation with my significant other, and she had brought up something, which brought up the series that I want to do in January. We'll talk about that, because that is something that needs to be discussed, right? And
Yes, I am all
I
about
never,
that. I
yeah, I know, and like I said, we're going to talk about it, and then once we get everything situated, because it's going to be 30 days. It's going to be 30 days of every individual people. I want to bring in couples because I want to get I want them to share their challenges and things like that, and I was trying to explain to her that it's not about you, right? Because a lot of times when we go through what we go through, um, we don't ask for it. It comes when it
Mhm.
wants to. It shows up at the most craziest moments, right? And when it comes up, we if we deny ourselves the emotional journey that comes along with it, or if we deny the process that we have to go through, because we constantly learn, right? You know this as well as I do. Every year, every time it shows up, if we figure out one way, it's going to show up in a different way. Then we have to learn how to get through that. It's not something that's going to stop. I often tell
Absolutely.
people my grief and my trauma is my mentor. That's how I learned, right? And allow myself to go through the emotions, or go through the journey and the process is how I learned how to start healing.
Yeah.
So I was explaining that to her. I said it has nothing to do with you. When you see me go off into outer space, right? It's me giving myself permission to heal, to learn. So that's what makes me effective in my area of gifting, right? I didn't ask for this. It's just the way that I have to be. But what I didn't take into consideration was how she was processing being with
Mhm.
someone that had experienced those sort of losses, because she has never experienced those before.
Mhm.
And that led into the conversation like, wow, what do I do with that? I was so naive. I didn't even pay attention to this. And so now brings us to where we are today and doing the work that we're doing, and that's why I'm curious about asking those questions and things like that, because, we never really think about the people that we bring in, or the people that are part of our lives, the relationships with our friends, the relationships with our family, because we're so focused on what we're going through. And it may
Mhm.
sound like a selfish thing, and it's not intentional. It's definitely not intentional, but they're going to process what we're going through totally different from the point of view of this thing is like a part of me,
Yep.
right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a whole chapter in my book about that, about how the people, it just surprises you. And I'm sure you found this too. Like, the people that you think are going to be there a lot of the
Mm,
times can't be there for you because they're too close to it or they're going through their own thing. But
right.
then you do find people who step up to help that are probably the people you'd least expect. People kind of out of nowhere who become
Yeah.
the helpers, you know. But yeah, it is navigating the family members and the relationships. It's a whole
Yeah.
process with grief.
Because
Yeah.
everybody has their own individual relationship with the people, right?
Yeah.
And that was something I understood early on. So I wasn't mad that, I almost started to take it personal when people left. But
Mhm.
then I thought about it. I said, you know what? I can't. I can't take it personal, because it's not personal. It's heavy on them
Yeah.
because they've all had their own individual relationship with this individual,
Yeah.
you know. like my mom's friends and stuff like that. They knew my mom from a different perspective. My dad's friends, my brother's friends, my son's friends. That's the one that really caught me because I was like, hold on, but I'm his dad,
Yeah.
right? How y'all feeling a certain way when say I'm the dad over here, and what I'm saying, and you tell it about, and it took me a while to go, you know what? I can respect it. I can accept the fact of that you feel a certain way, then I can respect the fact of that your child feels a certain way. Because even though I had my fatherly relationship with him, you was his friend. You're the father of his friend. So of course now you know what I'm saying, or the parents of said friend. So now you're trying to comfort your child, So it was the spider web
Yep.
that I went down. And every time one of them tingled, I knew right then and there, hey, this is not personal. And so I began to be mindful of the space, right? And
Definitely.
it didn't, after a while, it didn't bother me when people walked away. Because I get it. I'm not asking, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying the world has to stop, even though we wanted to. I get it. You have to do what's right by yours. And I have to do what's right by me.
Mhm.
Your feeling is going to be totally different from what I'm feeling, but I can respect you. And if you need me, I want to be there,
Yeah.
and things like that. So it was a lot of things that I had to take into consideration. A lot of not taking things personal, right?
I tell people that all the time. That and try to find specific purposes for the people in your
Right.
life. Like I use my brother as a perfect example. He I I use his story a lot because 4 months after Libby died, he gave me the whole, "When are you gonna get back to normal?" question, and I was like,
Well,
"No, never." Like, my 10-year-old daughter just got hit by a truck, I'm never getting back to normal, I'm gonna be different. I'm sorry if you don't like that, but that's who he is. He's not an emotional person. He pushes it down, doesn't like to talk about emotions, and it didn't end that relationship. Yes, did I want to punch him in the face for a minute? Sure, but but it's just who he is. I had to learn to find a purpose for everyone. He was definitely not going to be my emotional support. But
right.
if I needed my lawn mowed, or if I, something like that, something practical, he could be my go-to guy. So like I had to learn not to be angry at him that he couldn't deal with my emotions. I
Mhm.
had to learn to appreciate him for what he could offer, even if it wasn't what I was hoping or expecting for. So I think
Right.
that's a good way for people to kind of look at things there. So,
I got a
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
When you talk about your brother, I can hear the admiration and the respect in your voice. And he's just processing it a little bit different. And I'm
Mm,
speaking from a male's point of view and things like that. Things that we're taught when we're younger. Not to show emotions and things like that do play a role in our adulthood, right?
mhm.
Um, did you ever see him angry or anything like that? And I'm asking because it,
Yeah.
it leads into something else that I recognize, right? So often, well, I started asking this question here lately. Have you ever seen him cry?
Yes. I saw him cry when his wife died. His wife was the sister-in-law that I lost,
Right.
and he was a rock for her. I mean, I have never he could be a doctor with all of the medical knowledge he gained. He was by her side every single second. I've never seen anyone take care of someone as well as he took care of his wife. And yeah, I saw him cry then, but he does not cry a lot. It does not come easy.
Uh, I want to add to that. Whatever I said, that every time he was angry, you were seeing something, but you just didn't recognize it, right?
Mhm.
And the reason being, reason why I'm going to say this and leads to what I'm saying, men, we're taught to process things a little bit different. So we're not taught how to express, or you know what I'm saying, we're taught to suppress, not express, right?
Yeah.
And the way that we express ourselves is through anger. So what if every time you saw the men in your family angry, that was their way of crying?
Mm.
Think about that for a minute, right? It's
Yeah.
easy for me to push off the emotion of crying and be angry because this is the way I have to express myself. So if you look at it in an emotional way, this is how men cry. This is how we can express ourselves, because this is what a lot of people expect of us, right? You want
Yeah.
me to be angry, I want to cry, so I might as well combine the two. Because the more angry I am, will show that not only, you know what I'm saying, the next men that I'm around, you know what I'm saying, um, what I'm going through, but it's what's expected of us. And that narrative needs to change, because anger
Yeah.
doesn't solve everything, right? It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to be angry all the time, because that's how
Mhm.
we as men hurt the people around us, right? The people that are closest to us. Get away from me. I don't
Absolutely.
care. It's easy for me to pretend that I don't care, right? The hardest part is that it's harder for me to express what I'm going through. And if this is the only way that I know, we expect you know what I'm saying, and everyone else to understand, right? Don't you
Yeah.
understand? This is what we do. This is what we do. And it's the reality that we have to bring to the table of
Yeah.
what you're seeing is me crying. It's me expressing what I'm going through. And that was that aha moment that came to me. It was like, whoa,
Yeah. It's a great
isn't
way to
that
look at it, because I tell my brother that all the time. I'm like, if you keep pushing that down, one of these days it is just gonna blow up
yeah,
and
and
all
it's
of
not
those
pushing it
emotions are
down.
gonna come out.
It's just a different way of expressing,
Yeah.
right? That's it. And I put that in my tool bag. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
all right, I get it now. And then being a men's grief coach, there's always things that I have to learn, even about myself and things like that. So that was one of the things I started digging into. I was like, what if that's what people are seeing? What if
Mm.
the drinking and you know what I'm saying, the bad choices, this is us crying. This is us
Mm.
saying that, hey, I am not doing okay. Because we change, like you said, there's nothing normal that it's going to be normal after any of that, right? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because we have to process it. And we're going to process it the best way that we know how, with the tools that we have. Because we don't develop these tools right off the bat.
Yeah.
We don't.
No,
We
no one
develop
does.
these tools over time. So no, our world is not normal. We see life totally different. Those things that we thought that wasn't possible, get right. Guess what? These things will happen, or have the possibility of
Absolutely.
happening. And a lot of people perceive those things that we say, right? Why are you being so negative?
Mm.
It's not being negative. My reality has changed because I've had to experience those things firsthand. So I can no longer be naive and say these things don't happen. I can no longer do that.
Absolutely. So
So
true.
yeah, yeah. So like, so you probably see that with a lot of males in your family not being able
Mm.
to express that, but being angry and things like that. So I'm just putting that out on the table. Maybe that's what we're seeing, right?
It could definitely be. And that's
Yeah,
probably my middle son is like that too. Yeah.
yeah. A lot of anger, a lot of what ifs, a lot of
Mhm.
saying, blame game. I blame myself. I should have, would have, could have, right? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I don't take that away from no one,
Yeah.
because as parents, when we do lose a child, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame,
Mm.
because we don't know what the next person is thinking, right? You know what I'm saying? Are you looking down on me? You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Are you looking at me like I'm a bad parent? Are you? I mean, there's so many things, man, to unpack in
Mhm.
that. So many things, but I think that's what as grief educators and grief practitioners, that's what makes us the most effective, because we do go in with an open mind going, I get it. Right?
We've been there. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we get it, and we walk that path and everything. So now, what were the steps that you taken in your healing journey to get you where you are right now? Because I know you said you started going to class and things like that. I didn't even know those things were even out there. So I pretty much taught myself, right? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It wasn't until I started talking to other people going, really? I didn't even know this. I'm looking for support groups. I'm trying to surround myself with other people, other men, right? And I'm going, I'm not about to
Yeah.
talk around no women. So I took that and was like, well, I guess I'm on my own, right? But yeah, what was those steps that got Brooke to
Well,
where
I
she?
mean, it was definitely a rocky start. People look at me now like, how did you do it? I'm like, well, I spent time in a mental hospital. Like, it's not like this was a perfect,
Right,
I was great right off the bat. I mean, after Libby died, um, I went into work mode because I did, I planned her whole funeral. I wrote the obituary. It was like, go, go, go. Like after someone dies, you have no idea how much stuff there is to do.
right,
Like
yeah,
the bureaucratic red tape crap that you have to do. So I went into the mode where I just got all of that done. And then once everything settled down after that whole whirlwind, um, then it was just the writing and the journaling. And I read every grief book I could possibly find, watched all the videos I could find. Um, and then at that point I had the blog, and then that turned into the YouTube channel. And the YouTube, all of that started out mostly with just me sharing what I was going through. So it was
right,
all my personal experiences. And then I had people who were contacting me, you know, how do I get through this? And they were asking me for help. And then it was just more
yeah,
of like like I wanted to help people. I felt called to do that, but I wanted to have more education behind me. You know what I mean? I just felt like I needed to like, yes, I had gone through all of this stuff, but I wanted to have more of the research and the why this is the
right,
best way to do this and whatever under my belt. So that was when I started looking into like the certification program. And Lucy Hone, she has a TED talk that I absolutely love on resilience. And so I was just super excited to be in one of her programs. Um, and yeah, that's it. Just mostly just kind of gaining that education and then time and then speaking with other people one-on-one. And I did a support group for specifically child loss. And that's kind of what brought me here. And then I have a book that's going to be coming out in the early part of the year that kind of just outlines. I basically just took all of my nerdy research that I've done and categorized it into kind of a method or a process that I actually used, so I feel like it works. And I call it the trust method. So it's tell your truths. Like you got to figure out where you're at, like where you're coming from and exactly where you are at that moment. And then
mhm,
reaching out, finding your support system, finding your tribe, the people, and like I said, like what purpose for each person, and then
right,
unpacking all of the emotions is the U. S is searching for meaning and trying to make something meaningful, either, both out of your life and the loved one that you lost. And
mhm,
then the T is for transforming your future. And that's, planning, that you can have a life beyond your loss. And there's a million things underneath each of those little letters, but
right.
that's kind of the method to the madness. And I just sort of grouped things that I learned into those different letters. And yeah, and it's all stuff that worked for me. I will say, Tony, the one thing that I always tell people though is that my biggest soapbox is about functioning in grief, because people can see me doing these interviews and I go to work and I teach every day and I'm okay in front of the students, and I was like that pretty early on. I mean, I did the day program at the mental hospital, and then I had to go back to work or else I was going to lose my job. So that was kind of my only option. And at that point, I still have my 2 teenage boys at home and a mortgage. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't have much of a choice here. So I put my fake face on and went back to work. And I've always been high functioning like that. And I don't know if it was because of all the people that I lost previously. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
But I was very good at compartmentalizing my grief and being okay while I was doing things in front of other people. And then I sort of saved the breakdowns for when I was alone, or when I was at home and I'm not on camera and whatever. And I still definitely do that to some degree. So I always tell people, like, it's certainly not like I'm healed or, healed. And it's not like that's ever going to be a real thing. I've just learned how to process. I literally set aside times where I will just be like, okay, this Saturday, I'm going to watch a bunch of home movies with libs in them, and I'm going to look at her picture and I'm going to watch her dance videos and I'm going to cry. And I know I'm going to cry, but that's good because it just builds up and builds up. And I kind of hold it in while I'm doing all this other stuff. And then I just recognize there are times when I'm like, okay, it's built up. I got to let it out.
Right.
And I do, and that's healthy. And I tell people all the time, like, just because you see people like you and I helping other people out in front of the world like this, it doesn't mean that we're not still hurting underneath. You can still be hurting underneath. It's just you figure out, how to do what you need to do for the moment and then let it out when it's time to let it out.
It's true. It's one of the things you have to know when, right? You feel it inside of you, and then it's like, okay, just like you said, it's like you feel the overwhelming well, right? And then it's like, okay, before this thing comes out, I need to set out some time. I need to allow myself to, let this out and things like that. I need to go through the motions, again, one of those things I had to learn along the way because my grief is my mentor, right? It's my biggest teacher. And, I would be a fool if I didn't allow myself to extract the information so I can be better, be more efficient in the lane that I'm in, right? Dealing with men and things like that, because I do understand it from the point of view of being a young male. And all the other things that come with it, right? Healing is very revealing. You already know, it's going to unpack you, saying, and it's going to spread you out and go, look, this is all the things that you have to work on, right? And so, and the one thing about healing that people need to understand, healing is hurt. It's hurtful.
Oh yeah,
right? Because it's going to pick you apart.
If you're doing it right, because then you're acknowledging all of the emotions.
Exactly, and you understand that, hey, you know what? In order for you to be a full human being, you have to go in and you're going to have to unpack all of this stuff, So where can people find you?
So people can find me. I think the best place is YouTube. So if you look up Brooke Carlock Grief Education or just Google Brooke Carlock, my YouTube channel usually pops up there. Those I think are the most helpful because it's me like this, just talking to the camera about whatever it's hot. And I have a mix of videos where it's talking about my life and things that I've gone through or things that I'm feeling, which I find people like watching because they feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Like somebody else is going through it too. And then there's the mix of the education side and what you can expect, when you're grieving and kind of what's normal and what's, not as healthy and tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. I also have a website, brookecarlock.org. And that has my blog and it has lots of resources, free resources for people on finding support in their own areas and different groups and things like that. I have a bunch of downloads for like journals and I call it a healthy living library, where it's a list of, healthy things that you can do if you need to redirect your grief. And then I'm on all the social media sites as well. If you look for Brooke Carlock, you can find me there.
Links are in the description as well. I put them all down there.
Yeah.
So, man, such a Brooke. Wow, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing and going so deep into it. I know it's every time we share our stories, it opens up those old wounds. And as always, we're here. I'm saying, grief workers, we support each other as well. So if you ever need to talk, please let me know. I'm always available. And I always like to wrap it up by asking my guests, if you could leave the audience with something, what would you give them?
I know I already talked about the functioning, but that is always my biggest thing. Don't judge your grief by how well you're functioning. If you are someone who can go about with your daily life, it doesn't mean that you're not grieving your person. So don't feel guilty about it. Yes. If you are someone who is, crying and laying in your bed all day, that is also okay. I mean, you don't want to do that forever, to the point where it gets unhealthy and you can't function at all, right, on any day of the week. But it's okay if you are not going out and doing podcasts and making videos and starting organizations too. Grief is so individual. So please don't judge yourself by how anyone else is doing their grief. That would be my thing.
Again, thank you. And for our audience out there, if you guys have tuned in, thank you guys for sticking with us, and I know these conversations get very, very deep. They get very emotional. So if you guys can relate to them, or anything like that, please feel free to share it with anyone who can benefit from these. And secondly, please go check out Brooke. Check out her channel. Go check out her on our social media. She is amazing, and you guys are going to see so much more of her. We have so many things coming up. So
we do. I'm so excited.
Right, what I'm saying. So we got a lot of things coming up, and I want to say a big appreciation and give a big appreciation to you guys. If you haven't already, do me a favor. You want to support the channel, don't want money or anything like that. Go give us a subscribe. Hit that bell notification so you'll be notified each and every time that we drop a new episode. We have many more coming. Leave us a comment and share with anybody that you think that can benefit from these conversations. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. Thank you for your continued support. I love you. And until next time, peace.